And I remember him saying, well, as he's standing there looking with the flashlight on the deer, he looks back at me, he goes, well, there'll be no stopping you now. And it's because, he had told me when I got started in this whole primitive archery thing, he was like, you may hunt for years or your entire life before you ever kill a deer. And after building that second bow, I was like, this is how I'm going to do it. And I was determined. I said, this year I'm going to kill a deer. And within 2 weeks, and then the one that I went completely solo on is an absolute monstrosity. I mean, look how ridiculous this thing is. And then I inlaid a buffalo nickel in the side. Look how big the riser is on this thing. Look how skinny that limb, and then it widens before it gets to the tip. It's not chased on the back at all. There's no reason that this bow should have survived, especially being drawn back to 28 inches when we put it on the scale. There's no reason this thing should have survived. It is, like I said, a monstrosity that rattles the teeth out of your head when you shoot it, and yet I went and killed my very first deer with a bow, with any bow. Alright, so today I need to make a neck knife blade out of some mahogany obsidian, so I figured it is a perfect day to do a story in a nap. And I think what I may do, and before I get started, I'll show you a lot of the other knives I've been working on. I've been knocking a whole bunch of them out. Getting lots of knives made, especially here in the Christmas season. Big sellers for sure. And always want to have a nice selection, and I sure hate to run out. Nothing worse than folks ordering stuff and not getting it in time for Christmas. So I always stock up heavy this time of year and usually end up with just about nothing left over. But I think I want to tell you guys while I'm working on this today, if you've not heard it, would like to tell you about kind of how I got started and the very first deer that I ever killed with a primitive bow. Now, it wasn't with a stone point. Back then, it was actually with a Winslow Woodsman 3-blade broadhead, but it was the very first deer that I ever killed with a primitive bow. And to get started in that, we'd have to rewind the story a little bit until, let's see, about maybe 12 or 13 years old. I guess we could go back even further than that. And people ask me how I got started into primitive archery in the first place. And see, my dad was big into traditional archery, more so for fun. He obviously raised me hunting, but mostly we were gun hunters, but we really also didn't have a lot of opportunity for hunting here in Florida. So we mostly hunted public land. You gotta be kidding me. Just a natural spot in the middle of that rock. It's like, welcome back to another riveting episode of F That Rock. Unbelievable. Alright, now I gotta go get a new one. And we're back again. So, sometimes that just happens with rock. You gently hit it, and it busts apart. That's how it goes with natural rock sometimes. You never really know. But anyway, back to it. So, we either hunted public land here in Florida without very much success. Boy, that's a nice, like a little incision flake or something. I'll set that one aside. I'm working on trying to take this ridge, which I just successfully did, and try to get one more there. Yep, perfect. So I'm just walking that ridge down. And aside from public land, which we did not do very well on, but it was the act of going out and trying, and that was hunting with rifles and everything. But my dad would then take me either back to the family farm in Pennsylvania or up to where a lot of my family moved to in Montana, and then we would hunt there. And that's really where our successful hunting went. And I tell you all that to basically say that my dad wasn't very successful at bow hunting really with anything. Now he did kill a couple deer with a bow and a couple hogs, even with recurves. He only ever killed one deer with a recurve in his whole life. So he really wasn't a very well established bow hunter, but he loved shooting a traditional bow, and he loved the idea of it. And some of it was just pure opportunity. He was really pouring his opportunities to hunt into me. And so he really gave up a lot of his own personal hunting time to give me the opportunities. And now that I'm an adult and he's gone, but I have kids, I can look back and recognize that. And of course, I'm very thankful for those opportunities that he was willing to give to me. But he always said that if you wanted to have fun, you shot traditional. And if you were serious about wanting to get deer, then you needed to shoot a compound. And so that's obviously how most people thought. So you would think, man, that's a long way to come from growing up here and that to turning into a professional primitive hunter. And I would agree. And he certainly never discouraged me from shooting traditional or primitive because he loved it too. So how that worked out is we would go hunt with compounds, and I shot a hog when I was 10 years old with a compound and killed it. Had a perfect double lung. It was down in like 7 seconds, like real fast. And boy, was I ever excited with that. But I didn't really do much bow hunting after that until I was a teenager. I kind of just moved into other things, or would, hunt out west with a rifle or whatever. But during this time, we would go to the traditional bow hunters of Florida. They had their annual spring shoot, but then they would also have a shoot in the fall. And there was a couple other archery outfits around too that you could go join in. And I would shoot traditional, even at ones where folks were shooting compounds. We would bring traditional bows, and at this point, I was shooting a brown, I think it's a Shakespeare recurve, short little thing, about 35 pounds at 28 inches. So whatever age I was, pretty young, 8, 9, whatever. I certainly wasn't drawing it back that far, but I was winning the kids divisions and stuff with a recurve a lot of times. And he took me to traditional bow hunters of Florida several times, and I would shoot. And I remember that there were a couple guys walking around wearing buckskins and shooting these crooked looking bows, which back then we would just consider them Indian bows. It's like they were more or less dressed, like primitive folks or whatever, and that was just how you visualize that. You grow up watching cowboys and Indian movies and stuff like that, and it's like I really wanted to be able to shoot that kind of archery. Always had an interest in the idea of making your own bow and shooting stone points and all of that kind of thing, but I really had no exposure to it. But then as we would go to that traditional bow hunter shoot, I'd see these guys walking around, and I was always like, I want to do that. I want to try that. Well, then one of the kids that I used to shoot against, which is funny enough, I actually ran into his dad at a Knap a couple years ago. I guess the son that's my age, he doesn't do as much with it today like he did when he was a kid, but the dad had made him a cedar bow, and it was all filled with knots, and it was gorgeous. And I was like, man, I want one of these so bad. And my dad always wanted to make a bow, but he just didn't have the access to really know how, and didn't understand the principles of chasing a ring or anything like that. Boy, I kind of messed that up. I gouged right into that right there. I'll have to work through that, but that'll be all right still. And this was, again, long before the internet, anything like that. I mean, you couldn't just go on the internet and ask how to make a bow. And even at that point, getting a DVD on it, or I guess back then it would have been VHS, but that wasn't a super common thing, So he always wanted to make a bow, and I remember a couple times that he would go to Home Depot and buy like poplar lumber and glue pieces together and carve it out to where it looked like a bow, and he'd be real pleased with it. And then the second that you put a string on it, the thing would explode. you know, because he just didn't understand the principles of bow hunting or bow building. But then he started talking to some of the guys that were building these bows and learning a little bit more about it, and learning that you had to start with a stave. And then, of course, you had to know what kind of tree to cut and what those look like. And he didn't know what those were, you know, how to identify, you know, even what a hickory was or whatever. It just wasn't his forte. And so it just didn't really, and not only that, we just really didn't have a place to even go find it or cut it, you know. And it was just kind of a whole weird way to grow up and see, you know, all the things that I see now. I'm like, oh, it's plain as day. But, you know, back then it was, didn't have a clue what we were getting into. And here we go. I was trying to run that all the way across and I fell just a little bit short. And so anyway, I just kept falling in love with it. I was like, I really want to shoot primitive. And he was at one of the traditional bow hunters events, and as we were getting ready to leave, there was somebody there with a black locust stave, and he had been looking at the black locust stave, and I can't remember what the guy wanted, if it was $35 or $50 for it or something. I don't know, but the ring was already chased, and it was a seasoned piece of black locust, and my dad was really contemplating getting it so he could build a bow. He just really wasn't confident in it because he had spent so much time and they had just broken. So he was like, it sounded too complicated to him, the whole tillering thing, and we didn't really know anything about tillering. And he kind of talked himself out of buying it. And as the event was closing, the guy called out to him and said, "Hey, I'm closing up. If you want that stave, I'll give it to you for whatever it was less." I don't really know what it was. It could have originally been $50, and then maybe he got it for $35. For all I know, he got it for $15. I have no clue. Too long ago to remember the exact number. And so my dad was like, "All right, fine. I'll go ahead and get it." He goes, "But can you draw on here what I'm supposed to do?" So he took a pencil and lightly wrote, you know, "Don't remove anything from this side," which was the back. It was already done. And then drew pencil lines. You know, you want to trim it down and taper it. Basically drew out on the bow what to do. Well, we came home and that stave sat in the closet for a couple of years. And in that amount of time, too, they used to give away door prizes, and you know, you get raffle tickets and door prizes and all that kind of stuff at these archery shoots. I think most still do that. And at one of the events, it wasn't the same one, wasn't the same year, I got an Osage stave and a door prize. Of course, and then I was pleased because I was like, well, I'm going to make a bow out of this thing. You know, of course, I didn't even realize how junky it really was. There we go. Finally got across that. It's a miracle I got that. In fact, I need to drop the AC down for 1 second. So, but anyway, so I brought this Osage stave home, and it went right in the closet with the locust stave, and we just kind of forgot about it. So then, funny story, we're pretty sure, as I told my now good friend Donnie Wilkerson about this story many years ago, he said, "I'm probably the only one that ever donated an Osage stave to that for a door prize." He goes, "You probably got a stave that I didn't want." And he goes, "And the guys that were dressed in buckskins back then," he goes, "that would have been me and one of his other friends." And he goes, and then that's funny that nowadays I'm friends with him because he's a bit older than I am. So, you know, he was an adult even yet when I was a kid. And so it's kind of funny to think back now that the people that I was looking at as inspiration that I wanted to be most like, I'm now turned out to be friends with them. And it's most likely them. There's no way to know for sure, but probably is. But anyway, so here we are. Now I'm 13 years old. I've killed a hog and a feral goat with a compound bow, and I've got it in my head. We're taking an annual trip to Brahma Island, which was well, it still is an island, but you used to be allowed to go book hunts there, and they were just free-ranging exotics and wild hogs and stuff that's on Brahma Island, which is a several thousand-acre island in the Kissimmee, Lake Kissimmee, and just hold on a second. I'm looking at this to make sure what I'm up to. I had to concentrate for a second. And so taking an annual trip to go shoot something, and I'm getting the idea that I want to hunt with a bow. Well, that didn't happen right away, and I would in fact go hunt, but that's what kind of planted another seed in me. And so here it was over the summer, and I'm really wanting a primitive bow, like a wood bow. Boy, I really gotta hope I can get this. I need this flake, this bunch of junk here. I need it to go. I got some of it. Just that one mistake, I'm fighting that spot. So it's over summer vacation, and my dad's going to work, and he left me at home, and of course, and I said one day, I said, you know, I'd really like to make a bow. Are you going to do anything with that black locust stave, or do you think it would be okay if I tried? And him always wanting to please me and provide opportunity and give me something to do, because I love to work with my hands. I was always building something as a kid. He said, yep, here you go. This is what you do. He kind of walked me through it quick before he left for work. I don't even know why I was up that early. And he goes, here's the lines, and he goes, here's a wood rasp, and that's all we had was a wood rasp. No draw knife, nothing like that. And he goes, you just rasp only on this side and go down to these lines. And that was kind of it. And he left, and I guess he figured that he was going to go to work and he was going to come home and that he would find that stave and the that rasp laying out in the yard, and he'd pick it up and put it back in the closet, and that would be about the end of that. Well, when he came home, I had been working on it all day. You want to talk about blistered hands? And my sister was into gymnastics at the time, and he had built her a balance beam in the backyard. And so I used that balance beam as just kind of like a workbench to push the stave up against while I rasped over and over all day long. That is all I did. I just rasped down to those lines. So when he came home, I showed him where I was at, and I was basically just finishing up. And he said, well, he goes, I didn't expect to see that. He went in to the closet where the stave had been and got one of his bare recurves that was about the same length and took the string off of it. Now, mind you, we didn't know anything about tillering at all. And he took that string off of it, and he took his electric power drill and an appropriately sized bit, and basically held that bit sideways and cut string knocks in to that bow that I carved out. And then again, without any idea of tillering or floor tillering or whatever, all I did was remove down to the lines. He strung that bow up, and obviously the limbs were a bit uneven, so it was okay, well, we need to take a little bit more off of here to kind of even these out, because you can see it's bending too much over here. So I said, okay, and I went back to work evening it out. And that's kind of what I did the next day, was I left it strung and just went over the bow, and I would keep removing material, and I would just pull it back a little bit and then look at it braced. And that's how I essentially tillered the bow. And so it was shortly after that I was outside shooting it, and he come home and he was tickled with it as well. And of course, again, we don't know anything about tillering or draw lengths or anything like that. And this thing's about 68 inches long, so luckily it was pretty forgiving. He went out and shot it, just pulled it, right on back. We were curious as to what it would weigh, and it's a miracle that the bow didn't break. I still have the bow to this day, but I took the bathroom scale and a piece of wood, and you'd stick the, this on the bathroom scale and then the string here, and you'd push the bow down. Well, we marked on a like a surveyor stake and down to 28 inches, and then just pushed that bow, pulled it right back to 28 inches, not knowing anything, and it survived. Goodness knows that if that would have broke, I probably wouldn't be sitting in this chair talking to you guys today. Not because it would have killed me, but because it would have killed my interest in building one, and I would have said, that's it, I'll never do this again, because every time we try to build a bow, it breaks. And it was about 42 pounds at 28 inches, and of course I was probably only drawing, 20, like I do now. Probably was only drawing 20 inches on the thing. But I shot that thing every day, all the time. I was into it. Well, then fast forward to one of those Brahma Island trips. I think I was, well, I guess clue you in one other thing. I was still hanging on to the idea that if you wanted to shoot for fun, you shot traditional. But if you wanted to, if you were serious about hunting, then you needed to shoot a compound. And so ended up getting a quota permit here in Florida for archery season. And I was 16 at the time. I remember because I was driving myself. Well, Dad went to work and I had this quota permit. And so before school, I was getting up driving and then would go hunt and then would come back and go to school. And so the one morning I'm sitting up in a tree stand that we built on public land, and a doe came by, and this was back when you could shoot does in this area too. And the doe, I mean, kind of walked right down the trail, right to where the base of my stand, but didn't quite make it to the base. Looked right up and saw me. Didn't freak out because it didn't really know what I was, but took a couple leaps and bounds out in front of me. And while it was doing that, I pulled back the compound bow. Well, it never like fully stopped. And of course I've got sight pins and all this, and I'm just trying to guess where it is. But the doe's moving, and it's a rushed shot. I'm 16 years old. I shoot and it goes under its belly. Deer runs off. And then I was furious because I'm like, I don't want to bow hunt anymore. I can't, there's no way I'm going to be able to kill something with this. There's just no way. So I was excited that I got a shot, but for whatever reason, I was like, I can't shoot this compound bow. I was like, I just can't. And for whatever reason, I have no idea what would make me think that if I couldn't get it done with a compound bow, why would I be able to do it with that stick bow? And one of those yearly trips came around to go to Brahma Island, and I was like, I'm going to go shoot a hog with this bow. And I, of course, didn't want to shoot modern points. I wanted to make my own points. So went to Home Depot, got some flat stock mild steel, and I cut some points out of that with a hacksaw. I literally stuck it in a vise and then cut the points out with a hacksaw, and then sharpened them with a file. We didn't have power tools for that kind of stuff, Didn't have any sort of metalworking tools at all, but we had some old files that were my great-grandfather's, and had the hacksaw. And so I cut 3 trade points out and put them on the end of dowel rods and fleshed them with probably feathers from the craft store, like pheasant feathers and stuff like that. And I did actually at one point end up getting some turkey tail feathers from a turkey that I shot with a shotgun. Why I was using the tail feathers, I don't know. I mean, I still like to use them, but the wing feathers are better. I couldn't tell you the reasoning for anything at this point. But still got that kind of that one ugly spot, but I think we're going to make it. I think we're going to get this about where we want it. And prior to that, I'd still been going to the archery shoots, and at this point, I was dedicated to shooting primitive. So I gave up the fiberglass recurve. I was shooting that bow that I made when I was 13, and even at 13, 14 years old, I wanted to shoot the primitive class because there was no primitive class for youth, it was, when you shot youth, you shot against everybody. Well, I had this primitive bow, and I was so proud of it. I was like, I want to shoot in the primitive class. I don't want to shoot in the youth class because there's no primitive category. And it's not that I was worried about shooting against people, you know, other kids that weren't shooting primitive. It was just the idea that I had a primitive bow. I was a primitive archer. That's what I want to shoot. And Dad was like, well, you're going to be shooting against adults if you do that. Well, I was insistent. I was going to go shoot. And I made, at that point in time, I had made dowel rod arrows, but they were full 3/8 oak, heavy as all get out. I mean, way too heavy, way too stiff, everything about it. I had great big two-fletched, like full-length black buzzard feathers on these things. And I had a set of them. Well, you start shooting with the men, and you got to start shooting at the stake that's further back. And a lot of times I was shooting way too low, just could not. I came in second to last place in the division, which is an absolute miracle that I beat somebody. Maybe that somebody just didn't turn in a scorecard. I don't know. Actually, no, that's when they used to put the scores up on the board. So I actually did. I saw their score, and I beat them, but I was second to last place. And I was discouraged, but it didn't discourage me from doing. I had to figure out how to do it better. So then I realized. So then I started making them out of 5/16 oak dowels. Well, then that was better because they weren't near as heavy. So again, fast forward to when it's time to go on the hog hunt. I've already taken what I've gathered knowledge-wise, and I applied it. Ah, man, I wish that once. There's always one spot in there, something that just aggravates you to no end, just fighting me. So I took what knowledge I had from the big heavy arrows and applied it to making lighter arrows, and then put my mild steel trade points on that really were not sharp at all, but they were as sharp as I could get them, you know, with just a file. And my dad was like, not really thinking that this is going to work, but you can go do what you want to do. And the bow, of course, is significantly underweight, just don't know anything about it, you know, but I'm out shooting it, and I can hit some stuff with it here and there. So we go to hunt, and I'm feeling pretty confident. Well, we'd been hunting there so long that they were pretty okay with just dropping me off. And by this time I was 17, so this is after the deer miss on public land with the compound bow. So I was 17. They just dropped me off and said, you'll see hogs. Just keep walking around this hammock here and down this road, and you know, it gets close to dark, you're gonna find them. And sure enough, out in a pasture, there was a lone hog. I bet you it's probably about 50 or 60 pounds, was feeding out, and it was in the wide open, and I just kind of started walking towards it. It was feeding away from me, and I got close, you know, I would say 20 yards this maybe, and it kind of turned and looked up and saw me. Well, at this point I was already pulling back. I shot the arrow, and I hit it basically now. I know where I hit it, but I hit it on the spine, so it was just a little bit too high. But in my mind, buddy, I got him. You know what I mean? It ran off with my arrow, and I was like, I got an arrow in one. I'm gonna find that hog. So I was trailing it, and of course it wasn't hardly anything for blood. Found the rest of my arrow. I think we found it. Maybe we didn't. That's not important. But kind of trailed it as far as we could possibly go into a bunch of palmettos, and I mean, just wasn't much to follow. A couple drops of blood here and there. Didn't get that one. I was discouraged, but there was still some time left in the evening. So I started walking down this dirt road, and sure enough, there was a couple more hogs feeding. I snuck right up behind a big tree and got close enough to shoot. And by this time now, my nerves are just rattled, you know what I mean? So I ended up I hit the thing right in the ham, and it ran off. And of course, it didn't find that one either. And so now at that point, I was like, that's it, I quit. I done wounded 2. Didn't find any of them. I'm done. I'm not hunting with this anymore. And they were like, it's fine, just, you know, just keep going, you know, you're learning, you're getting shots, just go. And I was like, nope. I felt bad I was shooting them and losing them. I said, I just can't hunt with this, it's not going to work. So I kind of hung it up for a couple years and just went back to modern hunting, but I would shoot primitive for the fun of it. But it kind of got to a point where it wasn't even so much fun to shoot the primitive, because there was no real reason to do it, I guess. Like, I didn't ever see myself actually going and hunting with it, so therefore I kind of lost the interest. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to get that spot cleaned up a little bit better, because I'm kind of running out of options here. And at that point, then I was into high school activities and was dating girls and that kind of stuff and driving around with friends. And so we just kind of backed off of hunting in general. I'd do a lot more duck hunting and, you know, stuff that was a lot more action-packed. And once I got a little bit older, I decided, you know, I really want to go out and I want to maximize my season. I want to bow hunt some more, just because I like being in the woods. I ended up killing a deer with a shotgun, and shortly after that was like, you know, I really just want to spend more time in the woods, so I'm going to take back to bow hunting. Well, I got out the old compound again, went and got up in a tree stand, and by the time that the hunt was over, there we go, that was a big help in removing a big piece of that. It wasn't all of it, but we got a big chunk of it. Boy, I almost thinned it out too much. I don't like that. But that did help a lot. Now I got to be careful I don't bust this whole thing in half. I'm sitting here talking so much that I'm not concentrating on the napping as much as I should be. It's like my mind is somewhere else. So by the time the hunt was over, just one morning's hunt, I was tired of holding that boat anchor of a compound bow, and I was like, this isn't what I want to do. I want to hunt with the primitive bow. And so I also remembered the hog situation, and I was convinced then that that bow was not heavy enough and that the points were not sharp enough. And so therefore, there we go. Pretty well got her cleaned up now. Nice. It just took a little bit of thought and we were able to drive that ugly spot off. Now there's just a little cleanup and we're golden. So I remembered that Osage stave. Again, still didn't know much about bow building. Didn't really grasp the concept of even chasing a ring. But I started removing material off of that bow. I didn't even chase a ring on it. So it's again a miracle that it survived. An absolute miracle. But I carved out an ugly looking bow with a big long handle as if it was a riser on a recurve. You know, there was no pictures to be had, you know, on the internet, or I hadn't found a forum yet that existed. I didn't get on the Leather Wall, the Primitive Archer forum or anything until much later. And so I carved out this big monstrosity of a bow, but it was about, again, pulled it back 28 inches on a scale. Unbelievable that it survived, not knowing anything about it. You know, unbelievable. It's just one of those meant to be, God wanted it to be, and that's just how it was going to be, sort of a situation. All grace is all that was, because it certainly wasn't skill. And it was like 60 pounds at 28 inches. And I was like, yeah, buddy. I was like, now we're talking. Now I got a deer killing machine, is what I thought. Boy, and you'd shoot that bow, and it would rattle the teeth out of your head with the hand shock of that bow. And my dad was like, this thing is miserable to shoot. And I was like, I don't care. I was like, I will kill a deer with this bow. Well, he talked me into foregoing the homemade points, and talked me into using that Winslow Woodsman 3-blade broadhead. And so I did that. I got one little spot here I don't like, but for now I'm going to leave it. Might just have to be a tiny little imperfection, but I might be able to get on that with a micro flaker when I'm done and pop that. But that's actually pretty decent. Now at this point, it's just clean up. So again, same dowel rod arrows that I made myself. Didn't spine anything, didn't really know anything about it, didn't really care. I was like, the way I was looking at it is, well, the Indians, they didn't do any of that stuff, so they just made stuff and shot. So I was making arrows, I'd go out and shoot them. If they shot good, I shot them. If they didn't shoot good, I didn't shoot them. It was just that simple. And so I ended up going out and putting up a tree stand that I made, out of lumber. And by the way, there's so much of this stuff, of the stories and stuff that are in. This is my first original book, Sticks and Stones. It's not a very big book. It's the very first one that I ever wrote. It's probably not very good at all. But there's a lot of people who tell me that that's their favorite book that I ever wrote, because I guess they can relate to it, because it's all the stories about how I got started and early hunts and stuff like that. So it's on the website if you guys want it. A lot of these stories are in there. And so I got up in a tree stand that I made. Boy, I really want to hit that with indirect one more time, but I'm going to wait. And within the first, well, I was excited for the opening week of deer season. Let's put it that way. And during the same time frame, my dad booked a trip to go to Montana to bow hunt. And why on earth I was more excited to hunt. We got granted permission to hunt like 20 acres of Florida property behind where he worked and where I later worked too. And it wasn't exactly like a really good spot, but it was something we could hunt. And yes, there were deer there. There were no hogs at the time. And for whatever reason, I was so excited about the opener in Florida deer season that I decided not to go to Montana to bow hunt. And I look back now going, that doesn't make any sense, but that's just how my mind worked back then, and that's the way it was going to be. And so he's like, are you sure you don't want to go? And I said, no, I don't want to go. And he went up with his recurve, and I'm kind of glad now I didn't go, because he probably would have just given me the opportunity. But in that time that he was gone, he killed his first deer, his only deer, actually, with a traditional bow. Which I'm sad that I missed it, but at least I have pictures and I know the story. And I've been there and I've hunted, so I know exactly where it was and all of that. But while he was gone and he called to check back in, I was up hunting. May have even been the first day. I don't know. Can't tell you if it was the first day or not. But 2 bucks. Haha, we about got that almost all cleaned up now. I got one tiny little spot. That's a micro flaker spot. That really cleaned up. Really nice. So I'm glad I did hit it. I was up in that tree stand and I blew a grunt tube, because they rut earlier in Florida, especially in the area that I was hunting in. Like they're chasing and rutting in late September. And these 2 bucks come running in chasing each other. And fun story, the one buck, which is very identifiable because it had just real wide horns, I ended up killing it like the next year maybe? It's either next year or 2 years later, I don't remember. It doesn't matter. But those deer come running in, and the one was on a trot and slowed down and stopped. Couldn't have been more than 5 yards from my tree stand, but was quartering to me. And I shot and hit it like right in the back strap. And I know a lot of people know exactly what I'm talking about, because they've done that too. And it ran off, and of course I'm sitting here thinking I got one, I killed it. Still not really understanding, what a good shot was or not. I was trying to get it in the lungs, and had certainly killed some stuff to know, but I thought, man, you take this thing that's razor sharp, it shaves hair, and you stick it in its back, it ought to die, and I'm not sure if it got down into anything or not. Well, I watched it run. It run about 60, 70 yards, and it stopped, turned around, and I can see it clear as day in my head still to this day. It reached around, grabbed that arrow and pull it out, and then dropped it on the logging road that it was standing on. I went and picked the arrow up. It only had a few inches of penetration. So it obviously, you know, didn't penetrate overly far, and it probably hit like facets of the spine or something, and I probably didn't draw the bow back very far anyway. But needless to say, I looked for that deer for 2 days, convinced that I was going to find that deer, and then finally realized that I didn't kill that deer. So I was like, oh, it'll probably die later and I'll find it. I looked everywhere. Of course I didn't kill that deer. So I'm looking for a tool here. I'll be right back. I continued to hunt. Well, I told Dad about it, and he was excited I got an opportunity. So I just continued to hunt. Well, by this time now, Dad had come home from Montana, and we lived in different houses at this point. I was with my girlfriend, who is now my wife, and so I was still out hunting. And this is about 2 weeks later, maybe, from that hunt that I shot the one and lost it. And I was up in I moved the tree stand. There we go. Man, I really cleaned that up nicely. That's perfect. Time to just really straighten that edge and sharpen it, and it's done. Took me long enough sitting here talking the whole time. Things should have been done 20 minutes ago. So anyway, it's getting real late at this point. Like, it's getting dark, and I'm thinking about getting down out of this tree stand, and I had a crappy, like a hip quiver, so the arrows didn't go down all the way. And I had that since I was a kid, and I had bought like one of those cheap leather chamois, you know, for drying your car, and I wrapped that around that quiver, that tube of that quiver, so it looked primitive. And I had it up in the tree stand with me, and of course it was noisy because it didn't cradle the arrows, it would rattle. And I remember reaching down and quietly picking up that quiver to put it over my shoulder. I didn't want to make any noise. And when I did that and I looked up, all of a sudden I could see 2 deer up ahead, kind of heading my way, just some silhouettes coming through. And I was like, oh, now I guess it wasn't dark enough to be silhouettes yet, but it was getting pretty darn dark. And I could just see them coming, and I was like, oh, they're coming. So I put the quiver back down real quiet, and I got ready. Well, they went up, and they circled behind me about 30 yards and never came in to give me a shot. And so I waited there patiently, and they fed under an oak tree. I could hear them eating acorns. They fed under that oak tree around behind me, which is also the direction I had to go to leave. And they fed there for a while, and by this time now it's getting real dark. And I'm like, okay, well, I mean, this isn't going to work. The truck's that way, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this quiver on real quiet, and I'm going to come down this ladder as quiet as I can. Because you remember, these things are only like 30 yards away. 25, 30 yards. And I'm going to come down, because they were behind a palmetto patch at that point. So it was just thick enough, I guess they couldn't see me. I couldn't see them, because it was getting dark enough, and under the forest floor, just couldn't see them. Alright, that's looking pretty good, isn't it? All I got to do is grind that out, and then wrap it, and then make a sheath for it. Which is good, because I guess the story's nearing completion. Alright, we'll do it like this to finish the story. Then we'll have a little show and tell real quick before I let you go. So I get down a tree stand, and these deer are behind the palmettos. I can still hear them wandering around. Well, I gotta go that way anyway, and here in Florida, especially old logging roads, there's certain sections that'll be just like brilliant white sugar sand. So like white beach sand, but inland. So or a couple miles off the Gulf, but it doesn't matter. It's still just white sugar sand is what they call it. So it's real quiet to walk through. You can see the ground. It's white. It's kind of like snow, right? So you can see a lot better over the white sugar sand than you can over the dark forest floor. So I can see where I'm stepping. So I'm I am absolutely dead silent in this sand, and I could hear these deer walking. Well, I get right behind the palmetto. They're in the woods underneath the tree behind the palmettos. I can't see them, but I can hear them, and I can hear one walking out. And I'm like, holy smokes, one's coming, and I've got an arrow on the string. And sure enough, it walks right out in the middle of that sugar sand at probably 11 or so yards, and was perfectly broadside. I never even remembered looking at its face, but it was a silhouette anyway. So I don't know if it was looking at me, looking away, looking straight ahead. I could not tell you. And make sure I don't have a piece of rock in my eye. But I just looked at behind its shoulder where I thought that arrow should go, and I pulled back and I shot, and it sounded like I hit an animal, and it tore off. It tore off just like you'd expect a deer to. And it's dark. So I went back and realized I didn't have a flashlight with me, which is silly. So I couldn't look for anything. I kind of looked in the sand the best I could, but it's so dark. I wasn't going to find an arrow, and I didn't want to mess up if there was any blood there or anything like that. So I went back and I had a little flip phone, and I called my dad, who was home, and I told him, I think I shot one. He goes, how sure are you? And I was like, I don't know. So I told him the story. I said, I'm pretty sure. I can't find my arrow, but it was so close, I can't imagine that I missed. And so he's like, okay, well, I'm coming. We're going to give it time anyway. Going to give it at least a half an hour. It'll take me 20 minutes to get there. So he goes, I'll get dressed and I'll grab flashlights. So we had them big old yellow click top, flashlights. He brought 2 of them, and he drove out there, and we walked out, and I was explaining the situation, and we looked, couldn't find the arrow on the road anywhere, or anywhere it could possibly be. And he's like, well, where did it run to? And I said, somewhere in here. And he couldn't have got more than 3 steps into the leaf, and he's like, there's blood right here. And so we started blood trailing this, and we were going through this real thick, like pine thicket of young pine trees that some of them were no bigger around than a broomstick, and then some, may have been, as a baseball bat, but nothing, were just thick, real close together. And there was blood splattered all over the trees on both sides, and he kept saying, this is exactly what you want to see, this is exactly what you want to see. And of course he's all excited about it, probably even more so than I am. And we blood trail couldn't have been 30 yards, and sure enough, there she was dead with a perfect double lung shot. Found the busted piece of arrows on the trail on the way in. It couldn't have been, like I said, 30 yards maybe. I didn't even hear her go down, which is amazing. And so he was absolutely over the top excited. I remember him saying, well, as he's standing there looking with the flashlight on the deer, he looks back at me, he goes, well, there'll be no stopping you now. And it's because, he had told me when I got started in this whole primitive archery thing, he was like, you may hunt for years or your entire life before you ever kill a deer. And after building that second bow, I was like, this is how I'm going to do it. And I was determined. I said, this year I'm going to kill a deer. And within 2 weeks, not only did I kill one, but I killed one on the ground, which is, again, just pure gift from God. So many reasons that none of that should have ever worked out, and that the bows should not have ever survived. But I made a perfect shot, recovered the deer, and I was like, that's it. There really was no stopping me. And I even told him later, I said, I've got a goal. I want to kill it. I just want to kill at least 1 deer a year with my bow. Just 1 deer a year with my bow is all I'm looking for. And he goes, that's a tall order. That's a really challenging task. He goes, but if there's anybody that can do it, I know it's you. And thinking about this from my dad, who went his whole life, would kill maybe a hog or 2 here, killed 1 deer with a recurve bow. I think he had his doubts, but he never discouraged me. He was just like, I think you could do it if you apply yourself. You've obviously proven that you can, knowing that a lot of it was just luck as well. And honestly, I've killed a deer every single year, and now multiple deer a year ever since that year, except for 1 year. Now, I did kill hogs that year, but there was 1 year that I lost basically all places to hunt. I didn't have anywhere to deer hunt at all, and I did not get a deer killed with a bow that year. But other years, I had multiple deer kills or hog kills or whatever, and in that year, I did kill. Now, this year, like I said, I've killed 8 or 9. I'd have to go back and even recount. Isn't that terrible? 8 or 9 big game animals, deer and hogs, with sticks and rocks. And then we'll get into the stone point story another day. But before we wrap it up, I did want to bring this out and show you. So this is where it all started. This is the original black locust bow that somebody had drawn lines on, and I just rasped out. And you can see how long the handle section is in this. But rasped that out, and there's still rasp marks on the belly. We sanded it some, but being an impatient kid, I didn't do a whole lot of sanding. It was never tillered, just by eye when it was braced. And that's where it all started, and that one doesn't look too bad. And then the one that I went completely solo on is an absolute monstrosity. I mean, look how ridiculous this thing is. And then I inlaid a buffalo nickel in the side. Look how big the riser is on this thing. Look how skinny that limb, and then it widens before it gets to the tip. It's not chased on the back at all. There's no reason that this bow should have survived, especially being drawn back to, what, 28 inches when we put it on the scale. There's no reason this thing should have survived. It is, like I said, a monstrosity that rattles the teeth out of your head when you shoot it, and yet I went and killed my very first deer with a bow, with any bow. Never killed a deer with a compound. I've never done that. Just a hog and a feral goat. But that's the one right there. That's the one that started it, and it has no business even surviving. But I shot it a couple years ago just for the fun of it, and I thought, this thing's terrible, but I'm terrified of breaking it, which I'm sure it's fine, but I wouldn't dare shoot it now. It's more of a collector's item. But that's where it all started, way back 20-some years ago. So it's kind of neat to relive that again and be able to share that story with you guys. And I guess we'll have to share another story on another a story and a nap time with Hunt Primitive. So, all right, we'll catch you guys on the next one.